One of the most common questions that we get from agency owners is what should my margins be, or what does good look like? And when we're talking about margins, we're talking about two different kinds of margins. One is gross margin. So that's revenue minus your variable selling costs. So the things that are 100% variable. So the expenses that are totally 100% variable with the production of revenue. Revenue is always 100% variable. So everything that's variable, that's your gross margin. Then your net margin, that's the bottom line. So that's your gross margin minus all of the fixed costs. So things like paying yourself, paying your people, paying the rent, paying for software, the things that are generally fixed. So that gets you to your net margin. Your net margin, we want that as high as possible. Your gross margin, that gets a little bit more murky because agencies operate very, very differently. And one of the questions that we get is, well, what should my gross margin be? And we can do benchmarking, we can look at other agencies, but the reality is agencies operate very, very differently. An agency that has fewer employees but utilizes more contractors to deliver whatever it is that they deliver, they're going to have a lower gross margin relative to agencies that use very few contractors, have very few variable expenses, and use employees. So what? What does that mean? What do we do about that? Well, let me introduce you to production margin. Production margin is the margin that we get to after we take your revenue minus all of the production-related expenses. Now, production-related expenses could be customer-specific software. It could be ad spend. It could be contractors, so contractors that you're using to deliver specific work for customers. And it can include the salaries and benefits and people costs of your employees that you are using to deliver whatever that work is. So what is a good production margin? Well, on the spreadsheet that we're looking at here on the screen, basically what I've done is I've outlined, here's what a production margin roundabouts should be or could be, and here's what it would take to get to a roughly 25% net margin. A 25% net margin would put you relative to benchmarks, relative to our customer base, in not the highest echelon, but really, really good. Okay, so 25% would be really, really good. So how do we get there? We start with a production margin of 55%. So this is your revenue, so that's your 100% line, minus the production-related expenses. So these are going to be contractors, specific software, and employees who are production-related, okay? And their benefits. Don't forget their benefits and their taxes. Those account too. So production margin of 55%. The rest of our payroll goes to administrative-related payroll. So that could be roughly 10%. Okay, so that's the remaining portion of your payroll that is not focused on production-related activities. Accounting, generally what we say is 3 to 5%. For this purpose, we put in 3%. This could also be internal too. So maybe this is closer to 0, and then maybe this is a little bit higher. Just depends on whether or not you insource it or you outsource it. Continuing education, 0.25%. We want you to be investing in your people because that's part of the way that you're going to grow your business and grow your agency. You've definitely got to be investing in people. So if we look across our client base, 0.25%, that would put you probably in the higher range of what most agencies, at least that we work with, are investing in their people. But it's super important to invest in your people. That's part of the way that you grow your business. Dues and subscriptions, these are going to be, like industry organizations, things like that. Again, 0.25% of your revenue. Liability insurance, this is going to be your general liability insurance, your cyber, E&O, umbrella insurance if you've got it, all of the various insurances that are not tied to health insurance. Health insurance is going in here, and it's also going to be in here in the production-related payroll. So this is going to be the liability type stuff. And generally what we're seeing is around 0.25%, so plus or minus. Legal and professional, this is going to be your legal fees, and then other professionals, other contractors that are doing things that are not production-related inside of the agency. That we would estimate to be around 1.5%. Marketing and advertising, as everybody who's probably watching this video knows, we want you to be somewhere between 2 and 10% of the revenue growth that you want. 6% would be really good. So 6% is the midpoint of that. One of the things that we see very often in agencies is that it's kind of like the cobbler's kids thing, right? So a lot of agencies don't put the resources behind their own marketing and advertising effort. We definitely recommend that you do that. The most profitable agencies that we've got, that we work with, they are the ones, as it turns out, in going through and putting together this information for this video, they're the ones that are the most profitable, or the ones who are putting the higher amount of resources behind that effort. Big shock, I know, right? Office expense, this is going to be the catch-all. So these are all the things that you use to basically run the business, like the non-sexy stuff. Supplies, like recruiting expense would go in here, paper, pens, like ink for the printer, like all of the like stuff. This is basically your catch-all. Where we're seeing that is around 1.5% to 2%. So in here we have 2%. Rent, 3%. This is per an industry report from IBIS and various other benchmarking reports that I have looked at. Obviously, if you are operating virtually, this goes to 0, and the utilities, which we estimate around 0.25%, that's going to go kind of close to 0, although you're probably capturing that in some other way for like home office and stuff like that. But these both come from industry reports, and around 3% plus 0.25% for the utilities. That's what we would see as far as maintaining an office. Software, we're seeing a wide range among our client base. Generally, it's ranging anywhere from 0.5% to 8%. Big range. The agencies that we're working with that are of any size that are the most profitable, again, 3% is a pretty good number for that. And then travel, 0.5%. That could be travel for conferences, that could be travel to customers. That's a good number as well. So what we get is total OPEX of 30%. So we take our production margin of 55%, we take our OPEX of 30%, what that gets us to is 25%. That's really, really healthy. That's a very profitable agency. That's what you should strive for. Now, is all of this a hard and fast rule? Absolutely, positively not. The only thing that I know about your agency is that it's going to operate a little bit differently, at least, than what is shown on this screen. However, this gives a little bit of a guidepost and a little bit of a roadmap on how you can get there. Super important. You need to be tracking your gross margin, you need to be tracking your production margin, and you need to be tracking your net margin. One other interesting thing that I'll point out that I didn't mention yet is that when we add up your payroll, so your total people cost, the people who are actually employees of the agency. If you look at every benchmark basically across the board as far as looking at industry data, 40% is pretty much it. So 40% of your revenue should go to your people and your benefits. Now when we add up to 10, plus whatever goes into the production margin, that gives you roughly 30% to play with. Now again, your agency is going to be a little bit different. It's going to operate a little bit different, but at least this gives a good guidepost as far as how you can get to being a very profitable agency and the things that you should track in order to get there.